The third area we will address in today's video is the revised language to the timeout procedures. Effective in 2010, the following injury timeout changes are made in Rule 353. In the event of an injured player, an official will first declare a timeout and the player must leave the game. He must remain out of the game for at least one down. When in question, officials will take a timeout for an injured player. Number two, the player may not return to the game until he receives approval of professional medical personnel designated by his institution. Number three, officials and coaches shall give special attention to players who exhibit signs of a concussion. And fourth, again re-emphasizing from previous years, whenever a participant, either player or game official, suffers a laceration or wound from which oozing or bleeding occurs, the player or game official shall go to the team area and be given appropriate medical treatment. He may not return to the game without approval of medical personnel. We're joined today by Kevin Guskowitz, chairman of the Exercise and Sports Science Department at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, who has conducted extensive research regarding head injuries and concussions, along with Ethan Saliba, the head athletic trainer at the University of Virginia. Both of these gentlemen will help provide some insight into the NCAA's continued emphasis on player safety in the game of football. Kevin, just exactly how prevalent are concussions in today's football game?
Sure. There's approximately one concussion occurs in every 3 NCAA games. And we see concussions in practice too, which I think is really important to recognize. We know that in a given season, about 1 in 10 players will have a concussion. Well, I think the officials play a very important role. They're on the front lines. They're out there with the players themselves and have a much better view of the play than anybody at the game or even in a practice setting. The game official needs to understand they're not to diagnose concussion, but certainly to try to refer that potentially injured player to the sideline where they can receive proper medical care by the athletic trainer or team physician. So it's important to know what is a concussion. And the brain sits within the cranial cavity. It sits within fluid called cerebral spinal fluid. And so there's some movement of the brain that takes place. And with any sort of movement of the head or the body, and we have to recognize that it's oftentimes the head that's impacted with a concussion, but we also see concussive events where there's a whiplash-like event where the body is hit very hard, and so the head it rotates back and quickly moves. So the brain, sitting in that cerebral spinal fluid, rebounds off of the undersurface of the cranial cavity, and it results in a temporary alteration in mental status. That's the basic definition of a concussion, a temporary alteration in mental status. And there are a variety of signs and symptoms that we might see, and it's important for the officials to know those basic signs and symptoms. Certainly they're not going to, while headache is regarded as the hallmark of concussion, they're not going to see a headache in a player, at the time of the injury. But they are going to be able to identify a player who looks confused or dazed, appears to be stumbling, a loss of balance or coordination, an inability to concentrate. Oftentimes we see players, or I have many video clips of players that they start walking to the wrong huddle. And that's a telltale sign that there's something obviously not right about that player. Oftentimes the teammates themselves will help an official say, I'm not sure that so-and-so is right, and then at that point it's up to the official to, I guess, either call that timeout and refer them off to the sideline. But I think a good rule of thumb is there are a few simple things you can do with the athlete, and they're very basic. Just to ask the athlete, they can read the scoreboard. If they know what day of the week it is, if they know what the score of the game is without them looking at the scoreboard. So depending on the positioning of the player, there are some basic things that the game official can do to help determine whether they may be injured. And I think game officials do a great job of trying to help keep that player down, trying to back other players away from that scene so that we can get the appropriate medical staff out to manage that. So I think that's important to do. We've been studying this for 6 years now with pretty sophisticated helmet technology with accelerometers and video footage that's linked to those plays. We're seeing a disproportionate number of concussions occurring on open field special teams plays. Plays where the athlete is ill-prepared or unanticipated. They're in a position where they're not anticipating that blow. It's just good to err on the side of caution. As we say, when in doubt, sit them out. And so I think for a game official, when in doubt, send them off. Put it in the hands of the medical personnel so that they can truly go through that testing, of which they have baseline information on, to determine whether or not they may have that concussion or not. I'm really impressed with officials who are trying to do the best they can to enforce that head-to-head contact rule, because I really think that rule in itself has made a difference in football. And so I think for having been on the sideline for games myself, I've always enjoyed watching an official who takes the time to warn a player. So it's behavior modification. It's trying to teach that player that next time we're calling this penalty.
If there is suspected injury or we identify an injury, that a timeout would be called, or we would go out on the field and the athlete would have to be taken to the sideline where a more thorough assessment could be taken, and only then would we release the athlete back. Hopefully everyone tries to educate the teammates not to try to assist their teammate up in the case of an injury. It's helpful just to keep the athlete down, again back to the notification, and trying to minimize any further injury. And then again, they can provide standby assistance. You know, they don't want to leave a comrade in harm's way, but again, just more standby assistance and until the medical staff arrives. And the thing that is very helpful were when the officials would have the teams return to their respective huddles, because that allows us easier access to the athlete and kind of minimizes communication challenges. And only after medical evaluation and medical clearance would that individual be allowed to return to the field.
We're now